Everyone in the restaurant thought it was a joke. A handsome single dad set up on a blind date with an overweight woman. A few people even pulled out their phones to record, but seconds later the man sat down across from her, looked her in the eyes, and said something that left the entire room speechless. No one knew that night would change both of their lives forever. Rain tapped softly against the windows of a small Italian restaurant outside Chicago. At a table near the window, Emily Carter, 34, sat alone. Her fingers tightened around a napkin. She checked her phone again. 7:18 p.m. He was almost 20 minutes late. Emily quietly adjusted her jacket, pulling it lower around her stomach, a habit, one she hated, but years of judgment had taught her to make herself look smaller. Even when she could in single quotes t. She knew the looks, the whispers, the fake smiles. People always said the same things. She has such a pretty face. Then came the pause. If only she lost weight. Dating had been brutal. Online, men loved talking to her. They laughed at her. Jokes. Called her sweet. Told her she seemed different. But the moment they met her in person, everything changed. Some politely disappeared. Others didn't even try to hide it. One guy had actually looked her up and down before saying, "Yeah, this isn't what I expected," then walked out. Just like that. No apology. No shame. After enough heartbreak, Emily stopped believing love was meant for people like her until Lucas, her closest friend from work, refused to let her give up. "This guy's different," he had told her. Emily laughed bitterly. "That's what everyone says." Lucas leaned forward. "He's a single dad. Lost his wife a couple years ago. Quiet guy. Good heart." Emily shook her head. "People see me and change their minds." Lucas looked at her for a second, then said softly, "Then let someone prove you wrong." She almost said no 3 times, but somehow she still showed up tonight, even if part of her already expected disappointment. Across town, David Brooks, 39, struggled with the buttons on his shirt while his 9-year-old son stood in the doorway watching him. "Ethan, Dad." David looked up here. The boy crossed his arms. "You're nervous," David laughed. "No, I'm not." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You changed shirts 3 times." David froze. The kid had a point. After losing his wife to cancer 2 years ago, David stopped living. He survived. That was different. "Wake up, go to work. Take Ethan to school. Cook dinner, pretend everything was okay. Then stay awake until 2 in the morning staring at the ceiling." His friends had tried everything. Dating apps, dinner setups, blind dates. He turned all of them down. Until one friend finally texted, "Please, just try once." Before leaving, Ethan suddenly looked serious. "Dad." David grabbed his keys. "What's up, buddy?" The boy hesitated, then quietly said, "I just don't want someone hurting you again." David stood still for a second, then smiled, but something about those words stayed with him the whole drive there. 20 minutes later, David stepped inside the restaurant. His eyes scanned the room, then stopped. A woman sitting alone by the window. Nervous. Looking down, trying not to be noticed. That had to be Emily. But before he could move, a guy near the bar said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Bro, no way, that's his blind date." Someone laughed. Another person whispered, "Damn, they set him up bad." A girl near the counter quietly lifted her phone like she was about to record. David stopped walking, then looked back at Emily. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Her eyes stayed down. Like she'd heard it before. Like this kind of humiliation wasn't new, and somehow that hit him harder than he expected. Without hesitation, David walked straight to her table, pulled out the chair, sat down immediately. No awkward smile. No pity. No discomfort. Just kindness. Real kindness. Then he smiled and said, "I'm really glad you stayed." Emily slowly looked up. Confused. Because the way he looked at her wasn't the way men usually did. No judgment. No fake sympathy. It looked like he was genuinely happy to meet her. But then a man from the bar suddenly stood up. Phone still in his hand, and loudly asked, "Yo, man, you seriously okay dating someone that big?" The entire restaurant went silent. and what David said next would leave several people in tears. The entire restaurant went silent. A man was still standing near the bar, phone in hand, smiling like it was entertainment. "Yo, man, you seriously okay dating someone that big?" A few nervous laughs followed. Someone whispered, "This is wild." Emily froze, her hands tightened under the table, not because it was the first time she heard it, but because it this was familiar. To familiar, she slowly lowered her eyes again, racing for what always came next: the awkward silence, the pity, the moment the man would suddenly remember an emergency and leave. David didn't move, not at first. He just looked at the man, calm, unshaken, almost disappointed. Then he slowly turned his head back to Emily, and for a second, his expression changed, like he wasn't seeing her weight, he was seeing something else. Something deeper, something painful. Emily noticed it, and it made her uncomfortable in a different way, because no one ever looked at her like that, not like she was a person carrying something heavy inside. Only like she was something heavy. David finally spoke. His voice was steady, not loud, but it cut through the room. "Are you done?" The man at the bar blinked. "What?" David leaned back slightly in his chair, still calm. "I asked if you're done." A pause. The restaurant staff stopped moving, even the music felt like it faded. The man smirked. "Bro, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." David nodded once, like he understood. Then he said, "No, you're saying what you think makes you look important." The smirk disappeared. Now the room felt tighter. Emily looked up slightly, confused. David continued, "Let me ask you something." He gestured gently toward Emily, not pointing, not exposing her, just acknowledging her presence. "Do you know her name?" The man hesitated. "No." David nodded again. "Of course you don't." A beat. His voice stayed controlled, but something in it shifted. "Because if you did, you wouldn't reduce her to that sentence." Silence. No one laughed now. No one moved. Emily's throat tightened. She looked at David like she didn't understand what was happening. Because this wasn't how it usually went. Men either left or stayed politely uncomfortable. No one defended her. "Not like this." The man at the bar scoffed again, weaker this time. "It's just a joke, man." David leaned forward slightly. Now his tone changed, still calm, but sharper. "No." A pause. "It's not a joke." The word landed hard. Even the waitress stopped mid-step. David continued, eyes still on the man, but his words felt like they were meant for the whole room. "Jokes make people laugh. What you just did made someone feel small." Emily's fingers trembled under the table. She tried to hide it. Failed. David noticed. He didn't stare, didn't embarrass her. He just shifted slightly in his seat, blocking her from the room's attention without making it obvious, like he was protecting her without announcing it. Then he said something quieter, almost personal. "You don't know what it takes for someone to even show up here tonight." A pause. "So if you think it's funny to make her feel like she shouldn't be here." He shook his head once. "That says more about you than it ever will about her." The room went completely still. No whispers now. No phones. Just silence. The man at the bar slowly lowered his phone. Smile was gone. For the first time, he looked unsure. I didn't mean it like that." David didn't respond immediately. He just looked at him. Not angry, not aggressive. Just disappointed. Then he said softly, "That's the problem." Another pause. Emily swallowed hard. Her chest felt tight, because she was waiting. Waiting for the moment David would look at her differently, too, like they all eventually did, but he didn't. Instead, he turned slightly back toward her, and his voice softened completely. "I'm sorry about that." Emily blinked. "You don't have to." David gently shook his head. "I know." A small pause. Then he added, "But I wanted to." That hit differently. Emily didn't know why, but her eyes suddenly felt warm. She looked down quickly, trying to hide it. David noticed. And for the first time that night, he smiled a little. Not the polite kind. Not the dating app kind. Something more human. He leaned back slightly and said, "So, Can I still sit here, or should I leave too? Emily looked up instantly, shocked. No, please don't. The words came out faster than she expected. David nodded once, like that was enough, like that answer was everything. But neither of them noticed the man at the bar wasn't looking at them anymore. He was staring at the table. Quiet. Thinking. And for the first time that night, the restaurant didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like something was about to change. The silence in the restaurant didn't break. It shifted from mocking to uncomfortable, from laughter to reflection. Emily still couldn't fully look at David. Because every time she did, she felt something unfamiliar rising inside her chest. Not hope. Not yet. Something more dangerous. Confusion. That someone like him was still here. David casually picked up the menu like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just shut down an entire room with a few sentences. Have you eaten yet? He asked gently. Emily blinked. I know. I wasn't really hungry. That was a lie. But it was the kind of lie she had told on every date. I already ate. I'm fine. I'm not that hungry. Translation. I don't want you to watch me eat. David nodded like he understood. No pressure. No awkward insistence. Just acceptance. Okay, he said softly. Then we'll just sit. That will made Emily look up again. No one had said we with her like that in a long time. Across the room, the man from the bar slowly sat back down. He wasn't laughing anymore. His phone stayed on the table. Off. For the first time, he looked uncertain of himself. One of his friends whispered, "Dude, chill. It was just a joke." But he didn't respond because something about David's voice earlier wasn't leaving his head. That says more about you than it ever will about her at the table. Emily finally gathered enough courage to speak. You didn't have to defend me like that. David looked up from the menu, calm eyes. Yes, I did. Emily frowned slightly. Why? A pause. David leaned back just a little, like the question wasn't simple, like it had weight. Because I know what it feels like when people decide who you are before you even speak. Emily's expression changed just slightly. Something inside her recognized that sentence. David continued, quieter now. And I know what it feels like when you start believing them. That hit her harder than she expected. Her fingers tightened again under the table. You don't know me, she said softly. Almost defensive, almost scared. David nodded. You're right. A pause. Then he added, but I know this moment. Emily looked up. Confused. David gestured gently around the room. The silence. The judgment. The waiting for someone to leave. Emily swallowed. Because he was describing her life too accurately. Too easily. She looked away again. Her voice lower. They always leave. That sentence came out before she could stop it, and immediately after saying it, she regretted it, because it sounded like she had accepted it as truth. David didn't react with pity, didn't soften his face in that annoying way people do when they feel sorry for you. He just said calmly, I'm not them. Emily glanced up quickly. People say that, and then they leave anyway. David nodded once. I know. A pause. Then he said something that made her completely still. But I didn't come here to impress anyone. Emily frowned slightly. David continued. I came because I was told to meet someone who might understand what it feels like to start over. Silence. That word again. Start over. Emily had stopped believing in that. David placed the menu down, leaning forward slightly. Now. Not invading her space. Just present. Can I ask you something? Emily hesitated. Then nodded. David spoke gently. What part of you do you think makes you unworthy of being treated kindly in public? The question hit like a stone dropped in still water. Emily froze. Her throat tightened instantly because no one had ever asked that. Not directly, not honestly. Not without judgment hidden inside it. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Her eyes dropped. And for the first time that night, her voice cracked slightly. You don't understand what it's like to be looked at like that. David didn't interrupt, didn't rush her. Emily continued, quieter. Every room. I already know what they're thinking. A shaky breath. So I just try to disappear before they decide I don't belong. Silence again, but this time, it felt different. Not tense. Not cruel, just real. David looked at her for a long moment, then slowly said, "You don't have to disappear here." Emily looked up sharply. Their eyes met. And for the first time, David's voice softened completely. "You're already here." A beat, then from the bar area, the same man stood up again, but this time, he wasn't smiling. He looked uncomfortable, like he'd been fighting something inside himself the entire time. He walked a few steps closer and said quietly, I think I owe you an apology." Emily froze. David didn't speak. He just looked at Emily. Not deciding for her. Just letting her choose. And in that moment, Emily realized something terrifying. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about how to survive a date. She was thinking, what if this is what being seen actually feels like? And that thought was more overwhelming than all the judgment before it. The restaurant was completely silent now. No whispers. No laughter. No phones recording. Just people sitting in a space that suddenly felt too real to ignore. Emily looked at the man standing a few steps away. The same man who had mocked her just minutes ago. Now he looked uncomfortable, almost ashamed. I shouldn't have said that, he repeated quietly. I was trying to be funny, but it wasn't funny. Emily's heart was racing, because this had never happened before. People didn't come back. People didn't correct themselves. They usually just left or doubled down. She didn't know what to say. So she said nothing. David, however, stayed still, watching her. Not the man, not the room, just her. Like her answer mattered more than anything else in the world right now. Emily finally whispered, "Why are you apologizing now?" The man swallowed hard. "Because he's right." He glanced at David. "I saw you, and I made you less than a person." A pause. "And I don't even know you." Emily's eyes lowered slightly. That sentence hit her in a strange way, because that was her entire life experience. People deciding her worth in seconds. Without knowing anything about her. David finally spoke, calm but firm. "Then stop doing that to people." The man nodded slowly. "Yeah, I will." And then he stepped back, not running away. Just leaving space. Real space. For the first time that night, the air felt different. Less heavy. Emily let out a shaky breath. She didn't know she was holding. Hands were still trembling under the table. David noticed. He didn't point it out. He just quietly slid a glass of water closer to her. No words. Just care. Emily looked at it. Then at him. "You're not what I expected," she admitted softly. David gave a small half smile. "Neither are you." A pause. Then Emily almost laughed. "A real one. Small. Unsteady. But real. People usually don't stay this long." David leaned back slightly. "I'm not people. Double quotes. Silence. But this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was safe." Emily looked down at her hands, then slowly said something she hadn't said in years. "I used to like going out." David didn't interrupt. Emily continued. "I used to think maybe one day someone would sit across from me and not see my weight first." Her voice cracked slightly. "I just stopped believing it would happen." David's expression softened. He nodded once, like he understood every word. Then he said, "You don't have to earn that moment." Emily looked up. Confused. David continued, "You don't have to become smaller, quieter, or different for someone to treat you with respect." A pause. "You just needed to meet someone who already knows how to see people." Emily felt her throat tighten, not from sadness, from something deeper. Something she had buried for a long time. Hope. Trying to come back. She looked away quickly, afraid of it, because hope hurts more than disappointment when you're used to losing. David didn't push. He just stayed, and for the first time in a long time, Emily didn't feel like she had to escape the moment. Later that night, as they walked outside the restaurant into the cool air, Emily stopped at the curb. The city lights reflected softly in her eyes. "Why did you really come tonight?" she asked quietly. David looked at her for a moment, then said honestly, "Because I was tired of people telling me I needed to find someone perfect." A pause. "I don't want perfect." He glanced at her. "I want real." Emily stood still. the words didn't feel like a compliment. They felt like truth for the first time. She didn't feel like a mistake in someone else's story. She felt like she was part of her own. And as David stood there beside her, neither of them knew yet that this single blind date was only the beginning of a much deeper story neither of them were ready for. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and follow for more emotional stories like this. Sometimes, the people the world overlooks are the ones who change everything.